From breakthrough devices to the bottom line, we explore the investment trends, the commercial models, and the strategic thinking required to bring neurotechnology to the global market. This is the Business of Neurotech. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Adam Fraser, and today I'm delighted to welcome Michael Brotherton, co-founder and managing partner at Dragonfly 44. We're going to unpack the neurotech sector more broadly, touch on some corporate finance and venture capital issues, and see where we go from there. Michael, a big welcome to the show.
Sounds good, Adam. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Great to welcome you. You really do live and breathe the neurotech sector. You're the perfect guest for what we're trying to get to and discuss in this show. So before we get into all the good stuff, Michael, just take the audience through your backstory, your career today, and how you ended up founding Dragonfly 44.
It's my backstory is kind of, I never really know where to start with this, but I always had an interest in science. I always had an interest in neuropsychopharmacology and how drugs affected the brain. My father was an anesthesiologist, so I kind of had an early introduction into all of this. I also had a lot of my own personal mental health struggles that really began in college that led to me dropping out my senior year and really self-isolating for quite a bit of time. I eventually decided to, I eventually really figured out systems and things that worked for myself and decided to go back to school and finish up my degree and got a graduate degree and eventually ended up at a research lab studying endocrinology. I felt kind of because of a lot of the lost time that I had because of my own struggles and where I was kind of starting at a later time point that I needed to make up for lost time. So I wanted to move through things quite quickly. I felt quite pigeonholed and limited working in a research environment and wanted a way that I could touch multiple areas and be involved in multiple areas. So finance seemed a logical transition. I ended up doing a degree called an MBS, which is kind of like an MBA that was focused for science professionals, and used that to eventually leverage a job at a healthcare-focused investment bank. While I was there, it was one of the banks that took public neuropsych company, Compass Pathways, that I was fairly interested in public. And, me personally, psychedelics, I think were pretty helpful for me along my own personal mental health journey to get me in the place that I was. So there was a lot of interest in building relationships with those groups, figuring out who was investing there, and really learning the market as much as I could. That quickly branched into broader neuropsychiatry at the time. And I really just thought this is where I wanted to spend a lot of my focus. I was heavily positioning the bank to focus more strongly in this sector. And it was at a time where I think, again, after these IPOs and initial hype, that there was a bit of a crash and there was a lot more uncertainty. And there wasn't really the general willingness to continue to focus on these sectors. And so I decided maybe it was time to leave and see where I could build myself. Originally, I kind of had no idea what to do and where to go. But someone that I was working with closely at the bank, research analyst, who's now my partner, Joe Hoshmal, came to me and also expressed that he wanted to continue to focus more in this sector. He wasn't being enabled to do so. So, we decided to form something on our own. And Joe's one of the smartest people I've come across. So to me, this is an opportunity to have a partner, to build something together and focus exclusively in the space without having the credentials of the large bank behind us. We sort of focused where we could, and that was early stage companies, initially looking for support. And this is really new landscape for us because we were focused more on the public markets, and we had to figure out a whole new subset of investors. And really learn the space. But it's been definitely a very interesting and engaging journey to get here.
Great. So how many years has Dragonfly been going?
4 years.
Great. Thank you for sharing your backstory. It's really helpful to know how people kind of meander into the neurotech sector. Obviously, for a new podcast, I'm lining up a number of guests. There's an amazing depth of talent in the neurotech sector. Just in researching some of the future guests, I've been struck by the really wide variety of backgrounds of how people end up in neurotech. Some I'd say, maybe like myself, like with a pure finance, corporate finance background. You came from a sort of scientific underpinning. How necessary is that to be a sort of participant in the neurotech space from a corporate finance point of view?
Yeah, it's a mix. And I would say, although I have a science background, it's certainly extremely limited compared to a lot of the other people that I work with within the space who've come from top tier schools and have MD PhDs and have done extensive research in the brain. I'm coming from a much more general, limited approach and sometimes feel like I'm a little bit behind the edge there. But I think that really what this sector has that's fairly unique is that a lot of people come to it just because they're passionate about it and care about a greater good and impacting mental health and impacting brain health and have been affected by a lot of these conditions in a number of ways, whether it's personally or through family members. So it really creates, I think, a drive to do good. And it's at an incredibly interesting time where we're, I think, starting to learn a lot of new things. We're starting to be able to use AI tools more and more and learn about the brain as more of a systems approach and learn about the brain-body connection as more of a systems approach. So even though a lot of people have a lot more extensive background in it, as long as you have this willingness to learn and continue to learn, I don't think you're at too much of a disadvantage to people who have more extensive backgrounds. At least that's what I've been telling myself. So
yeah. Now, I think the deeper purpose, mission, vision, certainly my own experience working at Omniscient in brain mapping really does draw people to the space. But yes, people come from a whole myriad range of backgrounds. So, Michael, I want to get into Dragonfly, both your advisory work, and I know you're cooking up some exciting plans in terms of a venture capital fund as well. Before we do that, let's sort of ease the audience in to, top-down, 30,000-foot view. I see terms like the neuroscience economy, obviously the neurotech sector, the neurotech economy. Internally at Omniscient, again, we talk about the brain data economy. I'm not sure if we invented that term or if it's a widely used term, but yeah, talk about the sector. Where does it start? Where does it stop? What are the boundaries? How do you broadly define the macro environment?
Yeah. Good question, because it feels like this just kind of amorphous blob that I'm always trying to put different constraints and definitions around. And taking a real wide approach, everything's connected. And I'm seeing groups like the American Heart Association are now getting interested in brain investing just because of the heart-mind connection. And, we're seeing more and more venture funds within the space that are interested in metabolism and thinking about the brain metabolic condition and what that means for a lot of these conditions that we're focused on. Talking more specifically, I guess, about mapping the sector and some of these terms and neurotech, I think they become really kind of a personal definition. And I'm not even too sure if my own personal definitions of these terms overlaps with other groups in the space, because I'm kind of just, figuring out my own internal mechanism for how I'm kind of organizing these things in my brain. And probably a lot of it doesn't make sense. But as far as neurotech, I kind of see neurotech as its own separate thing. So I view companies that are working with neuromodulation, or building tech-enabled diagnostics like EEG, so things that are like TMS, TFAS, EEG, anything with a hardware device. I personally group that into neurotech.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of keep BCI, I guess specifically implantable BCI, I keep that as its own separate thing just because it feels like it's something different to me. But if it was like a non-invasive BCI, then I would group that in with neurotech. And then neuropsychiatry, I personally tend to reserve that for therapeutics, small molecules, things that are going after a psychiatric approach. And then I guess a separate classification in there too, I tend to keep digital tools separate. So if it's a app focused on mental health, I tend to group that personally in the healthcare services, digital tools sector. So that's just my own personal mapping. All of it's kind of neuro. A lot of it's still neurotech.
Yeah. With a podcast called The Business of Neurotech, you won't be surprised to learn this is going to be a common question and something I explore with all guests. I expect for the 10 first guests I ask, I'll get 10 slightly different definitions. And it is hard to grasp, what's in, what's out. There's probably a core at the center, like peeling back the layers of an onion. At the core, we all agree certain things are definitely in. And then around the ecosystem, we can debate, what's in, what's out. One view, and I think Naveen at Neurotech Futures, who I know you know as well, we caught up with him at the JP Morgan conference this year.
Yeah, Naveen's great.
Yeah, good on Naveen. He's going to be coming on the show shortly. He's had a crack at this and, bigger picture numbers for 2025. His snapshot was about $5 billion came into the neurotech space in calendar 2025. I see forecasts knocking around of, 50 billion by 2030 or 2034. BCI that you mentioned earlier, certainly in Naveen's analysis, is a big contributor. It was the top category by the way he substratas it. I suppose this isn't some intellectual scientific exercise about precisely how big the market is. The way I look at it, it's clearly a very exciting, emergent, growing space. And if you trust capitalism and Silicon Valley, the money flows. And the fact that there's so many neurotech specialist funds emerging, I guess, tells us everything we need to know.
Yeah. As far as the whole addressable market here, especially because I kind of focus fairly broadly in the entire neuroscience economy, I'm not even going to take a guess at it because I think it's a huge market, multi-$100 billion opportunity, but I really have no idea and wouldn't really feel comfortable putting a number on it. The BCI space in here, I think, is inherently interesting because it's attracted a different profile of investor who are, care less about short-term outcomes. They care more about the end vision of BCI. And I think a lot of them have different reasons for getting involved in the space. Some come from the crypto world, some come from the AI world, and are really seeing and thinking about this future convergence of the human mind and tech and how those things can be incorporated with AI to really create the next version of humanity. And I think that's a lot of what's driving the massive numbers that are coming into BCI. And I do think it's good for the whole ecosystem because a lot of general support and neurotech support is going to be helpful for these BCI companies. And a lot of new innovations, I think, are going to end up getting investments or getting acquired by the amount of capital that's flowing in to the sector from that particular area.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see the wave of capital coming into BCI. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of talking about Elon Musk and Neuralink specifically, but clearly the PR impact, the ripple effect from what Elon's doing with Neuralink is having an impact on broader capital markets. It's really interesting to me because I think if we zoom up again even to medtech above neurotech, so many sectors flying around, it's a long, patient game. For anyone doing medical devices, even the most basic level of kind of medtech, it's frustrating on the outside. Change happens slowly in health, which is, I guess, a good thing. US hospitals move at the pace that they move at. Things take time, but then you add the time horizons for BCI onto even a standard medtech SaaS provider is dealing with. You're adding almost decades on top, yet notwithstanding all of that, a ton of capital is coming into this space.
Yeah, no, that's it. Where I think it could still be interesting from an investment standpoint is, I guess, in the typical drug development realm, pharma is always the end buyer here, and they're the ones that are licensing, buying up assets, acquiring companies from these smaller biotech companies. What I do think is that some of these larger BCI companies could become some of that for the neurotech space. So, Neuralink could combine with all of the other Musk companies and just become the one large company. But I think like some of the tech that you see from Neuralink is not as interesting as some of the smaller, newer players and some of the groups that could be more agile and innovative. But I think that large company will provide exit opportunities for smaller groups that are looking to develop and develop new and novel things within the neurotech sector.
I mean, with AI more broadly, I'm constantly saying to myself, this is sci-fi gone crazy. We've surpassed Star Trek in so many ways, and all of these futuristic movies from even 10, 15 years ago. It's mind-blowingly brilliant, the vision of BCI. And like so many sectors within neurotech, within the broader AI landscape, there's some truly amazing innovation happening today. I suspect BCI is going to come up a lot in this podcast. You're playing in a lot of fields across, neurotech, neuroscience. I'm keen to see any other kind of subsectors or niche within that macro umbrella that you find, interesting right now.
I always like anything where there's systems and synergy. And within that kind of systems and synergy realm, I think there's a few areas. I think, more generally, I think I like things that sit at the intersection of objective measurement and intervention. So neuromodulation, neurodiagnostics, AI-enabled biomarkers, precision neuropsych. I like a lot of closed loop systems that I think could increase the fidelity of measuring things in the brain or measuring connections. Like if you add EEG to TMS, so you have something that's kind of probing and then reading. I like that synergy. I'm also getting very interested in the integration of neuromodulation with small molecules. There was a paper out of UCLA that looked at different psychotropic medications that people were on when they underwent rTMS for depression, and really looked at which ones could be helping the TMS or hurting it in terms of curing the depression. And there's certain companies now like AMPA that are now looking at shortening TMS protocols by adding a psychoplastogen. So this intersection of neurotech, neuromodulation, and small molecule therapeutics, and how the two can really synergistically work together to improve synaptic health. That's an area that's particularly interesting to me right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting exploring the macro trends, Michael. Let's shift gears into Dragonfly 44's specific work. And again, we've already touched on a number of subsectors. You've been working in this space for 4+ years. Are you a generalist kind of across the board, or again, have you found yourself working in a number of particular niches within neurotech?
From working from the advisory side, it sort of forced us to be a bit of a generalist and get a bigger, wider lens of the space. But I think in that we've built out this network of different funds and different groups who are specialists in the space. So we learn a lot from them and learn about really what's trending and what's interesting. Although I'm a generalist, there's still different areas that I think become interesting to me. And we touched on some of that before. It's a lot of these systems integrated approaches. It's a lot of platform plays. So companies that have unique IP that I think could be expandable, but are currently focused in one particular indication in order to give themselves some financial viability. But it's general, and I'm always just finding, I think, new areas of interest and just reading about what's coming out in the space. It seems every day a new cool thing is happening. There's news resource called Neuroscience News, and it's something I am taking a look at every day, and to see and hear and learn about all the things that are coming out of research and all the things that are being developed. It's just an area that continues to fascinate me.
Yeah, and it's a very fluid sector in a good way. So we're trying in this conversation to get things in nice, clean buckets and segments and subsegments. But yeah, there's a lot of crossover between the niches, and again, plays to the attractiveness of being a neurotech specialist. That's something I want to unpack again in the early weeks of this podcast. Generic, call it corporate finance advisory, and you've done some of this in your career. I've done some of this, an IPO, a merger, a fundraise. Again, there's probably 8% of that is very similar across all fields, tech, medtech, neurotech, retail, property, it doesn't matter. But what do you think from a corporate finance point of view, where does neurotech play differently, and where does it help to be a neurotech specialist in that field?
Yeah, good question. I think from the neurotech side, you have to kind of understand a few different areas. So you have to understand really the tech Silicon Valley approach. You have to understand the FDA drug development approach. And then now more, you have to understand AI and foundational systems and how they're built. So you have to have kind of a wider view and then understand everyone's different incentives for getting involved. So it's something we touched on with the BCI groups and why they're there and why there's so much capital there. But as a specialist investor, you have to understand why that's important and what their motivations are and how they could become potential buyers. You have to understand on the pharma perspective how they could integrate with the neurotech market and why they'd be interested in certain biomarkers that'll help with drug development. But then you also have to understand that from a regulatory perspective and why things might be slow to advance and what would take them to move forward in this space to get them integrated so that pharma then becomes interested in the neurotech. So you kind of have to have this broad perspective of all the different potential players so you can think about exit opportunities and who's going to be the eventual acquirers and how you create a viable company within this sector. So, and then, you're adding all of that on top of, I think, just a general knowledge, no matter how limited that can be, on the brain and how those systems work. And, that's just one of those things that, like, the more that I learn, the more that I realize I have no idea what the heck is happening there, but trying to get a better understanding.
Well, companies like Omniscient, little hat tip to ourselves, trying to help unlock the mysteries of the brain. Yeah, the most complex organ on the planet by some distance. So that's what we're all striving to advance knowledge in and get better clinical outcomes in a whole range of fields. So you've been the niche specialist advisor for, like I said, a couple of times, 4+ years. I know you're now moving into VC, becoming a principal investor, or certainly setting up a fund. Was that always part of your vision, or just having played in the space, you see an opportunity?
Yeah, it was always part of my vision. It was part of my vision back in the bank. It was actually one of the things I was kind of pitching the bank to do. I wanted to build an internal VC fund for the space that we can start both advising and investing in select opportunities. It's from a larger bank, it's a little bit more complex from a regulatory perspective, but there are other groups that do it. For me, it's, keeping myself again intellectually engaged and learning. It's just kind of the next iteration of what's engaging to learn about companies and find and seek what's out there rather than companies who are coming to us for support. So to really stay on the edge of what's being developed, I feel like we need to start taking a stake in it, and that just naturally gets myself engaged. So it's something that I've always wanted to incorporate. Then figuring out just where and how we differentiate ourselves has been some of the questions that we're trying to answer and figure out now.
Do you envisage, fast forward 5 years, hopefully you've got a fund or a number of funds up and running. Do you solely focus on the investing side, or do you think Dragonfly, the group, will always have an advisory capability as well?
Yeah. So, in both these realms, I'm just right now trying to wrap my head really on how AI is going to disrupt everything. And then, this is something that I'm actually deep in the process of right now, is building out our own internal systems for both the capital and for the venture side, and learning how really AI can automate, help us build out a lot of these different systems. So, on the capital side, it's really what I would like to do. The long-term vision is to continue have it be a space that develops and builds community and connections, and have it be a place where companies could come to, investors could come to, learn about deals. I think, what we really did initially was a lot more of a bespoke approach, and that came with some higher fees and more dedicated work. I think that this could be something that's a bit more creating community, bringing different investors together, a lot less fees, something that's just a lot more helpful to companies to get them greater exposure, and to to make it become more of an automated process that connects the different players and helps to build our relationships with different funds in the space. On the venture side too, I've been thinking about really how AI is going to start to change things. Because as we've been looking at deals and as we've been collecting materials on new companies, I've been leveraging AI quite a bit. And I have a system that is trained on everything that I've used it for over the past 4 years and all the information that I have. And if I ask it to put together an investment analysis or investment memo for a company and think like it's a VC that's been in Andreessen for 20 years and has all this experience and can analyze things in a highly critical way, it's able to do that in a very short amount of time. And essentially what that ends up doing, I think, is closing the knowledge gap in this space for investors in investment experience. So now all of a sudden you have at your disposal an extremely talented team of analysts who can look at and really dissect opportunities for you. So that got me thinking on the venture side, how do we distinguish ourselves, or how do we give ourselves a different edge when this knowledge gap is going to continue to close here? And actually, so I think the overall idea for me, it was first brought up by one of our partners, Jason Shea, who wanted to build out a clinician network. And then I think actually what really drove home the idea was working with you guys. So a couple things came out of conversations that we've had together. And number one, I think, was that neurosurgeons who are on calls with you really have a limited understanding of neuropsychiatry. And a lot of them didn't even know what the default mode network was. And for me, coming from a neuropsychiatry background, it seemed kind of crazy. The other thing was sitting with one of your clinician advisors was just the fact that so many clinicians are interested in getting involved in the venture side and getting involved in investing. So we thought about really how could we leverage this by building out some of the capabilities that we've already built out through D44 Capital in terms of being able to provide education and hosting events and hosting summits where we're bringing people together. So our kind of grand vision, and we think could really set us apart, is to build out a network of different clinicians within the sector. So neurologists, psychiatrists, neurosurgeons, and start providing them with education on a lot of the new tools, neurotech and therapeutics that are being developed so that they get an idea of understanding. They become involved in the process and can think about where those gaps are and what could address those gaps so that these actually become tools that they will eventually use in their clinical process. And then we can start to gamify the system a little bit. We can start to see what they engage with. We can build a sidecar SPVs and get them to invest in individual opportunities. But I just think more and more, again, thinking about how AI is going to really change venture investing, you need to have a people edge and you need to have a network and community. So we can really, that's just going to be our big focus is building that out and using that to source new deals and opportunities as well.
It's a really interesting answer, Michael. I want to get back to the fund with one final question, but just want to unpack a bit your comment on AI. And it's not specific to neurotech, but it's very interesting that that's where you went. It wasn't a neurotech specific kind of bottom up answer. It's like, wow, AI changes everything. And I think there's something in that. Yeah, Silicon Valley loves to talk. Yeah, the classic phrase is we're building the plane in midair. And it was almost like a bit of a rarity. Oh, we're designing this new product in a new TAM and, yeah, agile, evolving strategy quickly based on data in the market. But I think that's happening at scale now for everyone. Having lived through, the dot-com boom and then the mobile revolution, blockchain, digital transformation, 3D printing. In the business community, we love those LinkedIn, this changes everything. But I honestly think this AI feels as seismic as the original impact of the internet itself. So it's a very thoughtful answer that you don't want to be the world's best typewriter manufacturer or changing the deck chairs on the Titanic. You're not thinking kind of bottom-up mechanics about neurotech necessarily. You're thinking, wow, how does AI just change the field of investing, the field of how we raise capital, how investors make decisions. And it's hard because we're only 3 years arguably into this, and the impacts are starting to hit right now.
That's it. I saw a post a couple of days ago by a family office fund manager that I respect a lot, and his post was like, in the news of not having a job in 6 months from now, I just used Claude to put in company info and put together a whole investment analysis. And what it put out was something better than I could ever put out in, 20 minutes of iterating on it. So yeah, it's something that we all are going to have to consider here.
Well, it changes the cap table, the capital requirements. There's already a ton of examples of people hitting 10, 50, 100 million ARR in time horizons that were unfathomable even 10 years ago. You see 2-person, 3-person, 5-person startups where, again, 10 years ago, there would probably be teams of 20 or 30 or 40, and they're raising $2 million and they may have needed $20 million. So it really is impacting already in terms of capital requirements for startups.
That's it.
In terms of the fund, and I want to be respectful of your time, Michael, so just one or two final questions. I know it's work in progress. There's probably commercial details you can't share right now, but in terms of stage, do you feel like you're like a pre-seed seed A kind of investor? Are you looking to go a bit later into scale-ups and pre-IPO?
It's a good question, and will likely be a mix. As far as I think it's going to start shifting more and more into earlier stage and more into seed. I look at right now, and I'm guilty of all the things I'm accusing everyone else in the consensus phase of investing of, and it's just being worried about capital risk and making sure that a company could get financed and get across the milestones that they need to get hit to get the right partners involved. So to have something that is going to succeed, you tend to sway more in that direction. But again, going back to AI, I think, like you just mentioned, it's going to start enabling earlier companies to be able to get much further with a lot less. And this is part of what we think could be really, really, really leverage by building out this clinician network once we get them engaged in the investing side and know about and educated on what's being developed here. They're spread throughout the country. They can start looking for individual opportunities. And so many of these early stage opportunities are not getting the funding that they need. And everyone is shifting later and later and later, but you're missing out on these moonshots and the new tech that's being developed because they're not getting funding. So I do think that as AI makes things a lot easier for newer companies to develop with less money, and I think that as the clinical process gets easier and more enabled and more biomarker driven, then a lot of these early companies become more viable. So I would like to start shifting earlier and earlier and find those unique opportunities, because I think that there is a lot of opportunity there and a lot of opportunity to generate real returns. But like I said too, there's still some of that, currently some of that capital risk. So if I were investing out of someone else's fund right now, I would probably lean more towards the later stage consensus, but with ours, I want to go earlier and earlier.
Look, it's an interesting vision for all of us that less capital can go further and unlock a whole bunch of very exciting seed, pre-seed, earlier stage, visionary startups in this field. I mean, again, back to bigger picture, when you look what genomics has unlocked in terms of personalized precision medicine, particularly in oncology, it's astonishing. You overlay connectomics, field I work in with Omniscient, and what we think we can unlock in terms of mental health, psychiatry, a whole range of neurodegenerative disorders. And then you've got this kind of agentic AI wrapper above everything. I understand with the pace of change why people are concerned about dystopian outcomes. I get it. We've got to manage this carefully, but equally there's some seriously utopian outcomes as well. Like, we can do a lot of good with this new powerful technology.
Yeah, it's how human progress happens. We kind of skew in the right direction and then screw things up a little bit and then take a step back and then move forward. And
come on, mankind. Please, mankind, do not stuff this one up. I've seen too many sci-fi/horror movies about where this could go. But no, I'm genuinely in the field of personalized precision medicine. There's never been a more exciting time. So interesting times, Michael, to be in the sector. Thank you for joining the podcast. Thank you for everything you do in terms of the neurotech community. I know beyond the fee earning work you're doing within Dragonfly, you're very active, with Brain Mind, with connecting people in the community. It is an exciting new sector to be part of. So thank you for everything you're doing. Before I let you go, where do you want to send people that may want to learn more about what you're writing about and also the work Dragonfly is doing?
Yeah, two different places. We actually just did a massive overhaul of both our sites and are building out platforms for investors on both of them. So our main site, Dragonfly 44, the Dragonfly, the number 44.capital is our main site for the capital side. But in there, we also have our newsletters. We have a new insight section that uses, again, AI, and we sort of chime in a bit to gather all the important regulatory and financing updates that happen on a daily basis. So that's constantly updated, and there's a big news source there. So we want to provide that as a resource. For accredited investors, we also have an investor platform on there where they could log in and learn more about the companies that are on the platform and connect directly if they're interested in learning more. On the ventures side, our website is D44, again, the number 44, ventures.com. It gives a brief overview of what we're doing in the space. There's a place for clinicians, if they're interested in joining our network, to sign up and learn more. And again, a way to connect with the partners and meet with us and talk to us in person about what we're building here.
Great stuff. I will link those up in the show notes. Michael, thank you so much for joining the Business of Neurotech podcast.
Thank you so much, Adam. This is great.
Thanks for listening to the show. For more information on the podcast, individual show notes, and all the links about where you can find the show, please visit businessofneurotech.com. We look forward to seeing you on a future episode.